Hello, what's up, my awesome psych stars? Ooh, almost dropped my laptop. um, Happy Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday or whenever you're watching this. Hopefully it's not Thursday or Friday. But today we are, hopefully this week, we are rounding out Unit 3, finally. We'll probably bleed into next week a little bit, but we are finally finishing up Unit 3, and as a nice change of pace, I think for y'all, you'll be excited. We're not talking about memory anymore. Cognitive unit is basically all memory, but we're going to do a couple short lessons on some other cognitive processes like thinking. So go ahead and set up your notes. We are talking about the cognitive approach. We are on lesson 10. Today we're going to learn about the dual processing model of thinking. We have learned about another model called the dual processing model it was the dual processing model of memory, different models. So that's why I'm calling it the dual processing model of thinking. I know psychologists were annoying. Well, I'm not a psychologist, but they're annoying, you know. Okay, so I want you to pause this and take a couple seconds to think about, how do you think you think? How do you make decisions? And what are some examples that you have? It's kind of weird to think about how you think, but I think it's important to, like, how would you tell someone how you think about things? So I don't know, kind of sounds crazy, but think about it, jot a couple ideas down, and then please come to office hours. I miss y'all and I want to see you. So hopefully I'll see you at office hours this week. Okay, let's jump right in. So our guiding questions for today. How do we study thinking? It was probably kind of difficult to answer that question. Like, how do you explain how you think about things? Some people think about things like with an internal monologue. Some people don't. How do we explain it? So we're going to talk about how, really shortly, about how psychologists study thinking and if you guys think that's even a valid way to study thinking. And then we're also going to explore, what is this dual processing model of thinking? What does it mean? Etc. So why this matters in class, you're going to be tested on this on your test next year, and then why do you think it matters in life? Do you think it's possible to study your thoughts? Why or why not? How do you think psychologists study thinking and decision making? And then, I don't know, I searched thinking meme, and this came up and it made me laugh, of me trying to figure out which end of the square blanket feels the longest, and I realized there was a typo in that, but I didn't make it. I just found it. It was funny. Okay. So let's jump in. I know, like I said, you guys are probably so excited, but we are finally shifting from this idea of memory to thinking and decision making for a couple days before we finish up with cognitive units. So let's talk about thinking. How do psychologists study thinking? Is it possible to study thinking? Mainly the way that thinking is studied is through this process called verbal protocols. Basically, a verbal protocol is just an interview where the goal is trying to make the internal thought processes of somebody public rather than private events. So you're trying to draw out those thought processes. The method involves asking participants to think aloud as they carry out a task or experience something. Example of this all the time, teachers do it to y'all all the time, is literally when I just ask you, okay, walk me through how you did that, or walk me through what you're thinking. That's literally just verbal protocol. So it's just if I'm doing an experiment, I just ask the participants, hey, walk me through what you're thinking while you're doing this. And if you want to see an example of the protocol or it more broken down, I linked a video on Google Classroom for an example of how it might work. So you can watch that video, kind of interesting. Okay, so verbal protocols as a research method. Is it valid? Is it not? Scientists still use method. Every method is going to have a strength and weakness, right? So I'm showing you a lot of weaknesses, but it's still a strength because it's kind of the only way we can study how someone thinks, right? Like, if you can come up with a better way to study how someone thinks, let me know, because that would be awesome. But there's really no other way to study how someone's actually thinking through something. So it does give us access to what we would say maybe is complex internal thought that would otherwise be unavailable. But when thinking aloud, if you even think about when I ask y'all to tell me, okay, walk me through how you thought about this, y'all might not say everything that comes to your mind. And some things are really difficult to put into words, or maybe you're reluctant to express it because of social norms or because of your fear of being judged. So you're still kind of what word am I looking for? You're kind of holding back what you might say when you're thinking aloud. It also relies on participants to be articulate. It relies on participants to be able to describe what they are thinking. And I'm sure y'all have friends. I'm like this sometimes. I am not the most articulate person sometimes. I can't come up with my words. I ramble. So it is not always the case that all of your participants will be articulate and be able to actually express what they're thinking. The act of thinking aloud could also, for all we know, change the thought process. So the data that is generated could be unnatural because maybe when you think aloud, the way you think actually changes. And then, interestingly, these two researchers, Nisbet and Wilson, in 1977 proposed this idea of the introspection illusion. Basically, they asked participants to verbally explain why they had a particular preference or how they solved a problem. And the researchers concluded that our reports of our own mental processes are basically reconstructed. They basically are saying that this idea that we can introspect and reflect on ourselves is an illusion and we really don't have access to our higher order thinking. Kind of an interesting idea. Just wanted to throw that out there for y'all. So we already answered our first question, which is how do we study thinking? Essentially, the only way to study thinking is verbal protocols, is asking people to explain what they are thinking about as they do it. So now we're going to jump into our second guiding question of the day, which is what is this dual processing model of thinking? And what I want you to do is get a scrap sheet of paper. You can also do it in your notes if you want. And we're going to do a little at-home experiment. I hope it works. So on a scrap sheet of paper, just number 1 through 7, there's going to be 7 questions. I want you to answer the questions that follow as quickly as you can. I'm only going to pause and give you like 10 seconds for each one. If you need to pause the video, you can, but it kind of defeats the purpose. So literally just answer as quick as you can. Okay, I'm going to get rid of my face. Number 1 through 7. When you're ready, press play, unless I'm still playing and you're already ready. Okay. How many murders do you think were committed in the United States in 2018? How long does it take the Earth to go around the sun? A bat and ball cost $1.10. The bat cost $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Is the following argument valid? All roses are flowers. Some flowers don't last long. Therefore, some roses don't last long. If it takes five machines 5 minutes to make 5 widgets, how long would it take 100 machines to make 100 widgets? 100 minutes or 5 minutes? In a lake, there is a patch of lily pads. Every day, the patch doubles in size. If it takes 48 days to cover the entire lake, how long would it take to cover half the lake? 24 days or 47 days? How many murders do you think were committed in New York City in 2018? So you should have answers to all 7 questions, and now we're going to actually go through the answers. And as we're going through them, I want you to really think about why do you think you made some of the mistakes that you made? Because you probably made some mistakes. Okay, so number 1, how many murders do you think were committed in the United States in 2018? I know there's not necessarily a correct, well, there is a correct answer for this, but I know that you probably don't know it. But it's interesting to compare what you put for this question to what you put for the last one. So just make a note of that when we get to it. If you want to know, there were estimated 16,214 murders in the US in 2018. How long does it take the Earth to go around the sun? Did you say 24 hours? I hope not. 1 year, right? 1 year to go around the sun. Okay. A bat and a ball cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? A lot of people say that the ball costs 10 cents. If the ball costs 10 cents, then how much the bat has to cost? $1.10, and that means the total cost would be $1.20. So the bat and the ball costs 5 cents, because then the bat would cost $1.05, and 5 cents plus $1.05 are $1.10. Is the following argument valid? All roses are flowers. Some flowers don't last long. Therefore, some roses don't last long. This is actually not valid because in the second sentence, we do not know if roses are included in some flowers. So although you might feel like, oh yeah, this is definitely correct, it's not valid because we don't know if roses fit into this group. I was never good. This is like a logic problem. I was always bad at these. We had to do them in TOK when I was in, I'm bad at them. So don't feel bad about that one. If it takes 5 machines, 5 minutes to make 5 widgets, how long would it take 100 machines to make 100 widgets? 100 minutes or 5 minutes? It would take 5 minutes because 5 machines make 5 widgets, so 100 machines making 100 widgets wouldn't cause the time to increase. It would be like if those 5 machines were having to make 100 widgets, but they're 100 machines now, so it still should just take them 5 minutes. Okay, in a lake, there's a patch of lily pads. Every day the patch doubles in size. If it takes 48 days to cover the entire lake, how long would it take to cover half the lake? So every day it doubles in size. So it should only take 47, it should take 47 days for it to get to half the lake, because then the last day it'll cover the other half because it's doubling every day. So a lot of people say 24 days, but it's 47. And then last but not least, how many murders do you think were committed in New York City in 2018? If you want to know, the answer is actually 289. Probably a lot lower than what you guessed. A lot of times, so look at your answer for number 7 and number 1. A lot of times people actually put a higher number for number 7 than number 1, which wouldn't make sense, right? Because New York City is in the US, so it should definitely have less murders than the total US population. But another thing that also often happens is that you kind of overcompensate for New York City. So you might have put, if you put for the US 10,000, maybe you put like 5,000 in New York City, meaning half of the murders in the entire country happen in one place, which is statistically probably not true. So yeah, if you want to know the answer, it's 289. Okay. So what is the whole point? Why do you think you made some of the mistakes that you made? Do you think maybe you made some of the mistakes because I was pressuring you with time, because you were just trying to get the answer as quick as possible? What do you think? Come to office hours and tell me. I'd love to hear. But basically, a lot of the mistakes that were made, people attribute to this idea of the dual processing theory of thinking. So what I want you to do is watch the video on the science of thinking, which is linked in Google Classroom. This is the cover of it. And just enjoy it. It's 12 minutes, so it's a little bit long, but it's really interesting. And then I want you to come back here and we're going to finish up with some definitions of the concepts that are talked about in the video. So I'll see you back here after you watch the science of thinking. Awesome. So hopefully you enjoyed that. And now we're going to finish up with some notes on what you learned about. So the dual processing model of thinking. What is it? What do I need to know about it? So essentially, system 1 thinking. You need to know about the 2 systems, which we talked about, system 1 and system 2. So system 1 thinking is often about intuition and instinct. It is going to focus on what it sees and ignore absent evidence. So it's basically just focusing on what it sees and ignore any evidence that maybe it can't see. It's going to base decisions on past experience and knowledge, meaning it's basically basing its decision on already established schema that you already have. It is quick, but it's prone to errors. It also generates impressions. And it takes shortcuts, which we call heuristics. And you're going to learn a little bit more about heuristics next class, but it's a shortcut. It operates automatically, or it's just fast. If you think of it as fast thinking, you'll probably be fine. And then here's a picture I found online saying that 95% of your thinking is system 1. I don't know where they got that number from, but system 1 is unconscious, fast, associative. It's kind of like autopilot. Whereas system 2 is what we might call rational thinking. It is going to require concentration and effort. It is going to work with abstract concepts. It works with logic, and it works through logic, and it uses conscious reasoning. It is more reliable, but it's slow. So this is like your slow thinking, where you that moment where you might like have to really think for a minute rather than just kind of being on autopilot. So that's system 2 thinking, which is more rational. If you can think of system 1 as fast and system 2 as kind of the slow, logical brain, then you'll be good. Okay, so why do we tend to use system 1 thinking a lot? We rely on it a lot more, it seems, especially from what we saw in that video. So one of the reasons goes back to that cognitive key idea, is that we are cognitive cheapskates. We want to use as little energy as possible, use as little energy as we can to think. So in normal language, we're just lazy thinkers. Another reason is that sometimes even when we want to focus, it's difficult to focus. I'm experiencing that especially during quarantine. Like, there are so many other things going on that it makes it difficult to focus. And when we try to focus for too long, or the task feels too difficult, over time, you will experience ego depletion, basically meaning like you'll start to feel bad about yourself, and that's not good for your mental health. So you don't want to experience ego depletion. Your brain doesn't want you to experience that. So you just jump to system 1, like just associate, right? And then sometimes you have too many other things going on in your mind to allocate energy to solving this problem, and that's because your cognitive load might be too high. So if you've ever experienced a time where you feel like really stressed and there's a lot going on, I know I have this sometimes, and you're like, I just cannot even deal with this right now. That might be because your cognitive load is too high and you're trying to do too much work up in your brain. You need to reduce your cognitive load. And then last but not least, all of this together is basically referred to as the law of least effort, meaning that as human beings, if there are several ways of achieving the same goal, people will choose the least demanding course of action almost always, because that saves our cognitive load, it saves our ego, it makes things easier on us. So that's it for your notes. Sorry, I know today was a little long with the video, but hopefully you found it interesting. But that is it for your notes today. I'm going to finish with this kind of fun, another fun at-home experiment where I'm going to challenge you to use your system 2 thinking. And I know that we have to use a lot of system 2 right now with everything that's going on in the world, but try and use your system 2 here. This is called the Wason selection task. Ugh, I literally cannot talk today, y'all. Okay. This is called the Wason selection task. So looking at these cards, which 2 cards must be turned over to test the idea that if a card shows an even number on one face, then its opposite face is red. And this one's red and this one's brown. So if you need to pause, try and figure out the answer. I'm going to tell you the answer next, but try and use that system 2. Okay, if you guessed that, or not guessed, but if you use your system 2, you would have to turn over the 8 and the brown card, because the whole point is that you need to figure out if anything's going to violate the rule. If you turn over the 3 and it's red, that doesn't necessarily violate the rule that any card with an even number is red, because the rule doesn't say that a card with an odd number is not red. So if you turn the 3 over and it's red, that doesn't necessarily violate the rule. But if you turn the 8 over and it is not red, it violates the rule. And if you turn the brown card over and it is even, that also violates the rule. So that's why you need to turn over the 8 and the brown card. Kind of cool. Okay, so your activity today is hopefully so easy, because I know you took a lot of notes and watched that longer video. So all your activity today is I want you to just comment on the classroom post with your own example of an answer to this question. So on the 3.10 classwork material, you should be able to comment. I'm going to comment there to show you how to do it. I want you to just tell me a real life example of how system 1 thinking might move to system 2 thinking. Try and think of it in your own life, or I don't know, just a hypothetical. And remember, system 1 is that fast, associative, cheapskate thinking system, and system 2 is the data-based, rational, slower system. So when is a real life example of when you might move from system 1 to system 2 thinking? And feel free to interact with each other in the comments, that'd be fun. But you can see my comment with my own example of system 1 moving to system 2 thinking. And that is all I need you to do for today. But I hope to see y'all at office hours. And if I don't, have an awesome, fabulous, wonderful week. Miss y'all.